Morning.
Good morning. Matthew? Today is
Friday.
Friday. August
I want to say the
7th. We just said this.
We can be
Reading Esther.
1 and 2.
Esther 1 and 2. Don't yawn. People are just waking up. Okay, good. All right, so we are at the very end of the day. We have been over there at convention all day long. We did not do Bible reading during dinner time.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because Bill Winston, he went into overflow and he kept going so that we didn't have very long at all. We had to be over there in like less than an hour, right? We had to come eat and get back over there. And the reason why we had to go over there was why? We had to be over there early? Why?
To worship.
To worship?
And to get our seats.
To get our seats where?
We got our seats in the reserved area where the pastors usually sit.
Why?
Because you're going to find out. Testimony.
Because of Jesus' testimony of what he did to your arm back in 2018. Yes. And so we recorded that.
You'll see.
Your hand got hurt. And we've prayed over it.
You're fine.
Oh, wow. All right, so let's get to reading. We're going to read Esther. Queen Vashti deposed. Now in the days of Ahasuerus, also called Xerxes, who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces in those days. The palace where King Xerxes sat on the royal throne of his kingdom was in Susa. In the 3rd year of his reign, he prepared a feast for all his officials and his servants. So the army commanders of Persia and Media, the nobles and the officials of the provinces were before him. He unveiled the riches of his glorious kingdom and the costly luxury of his greatness for many days, 180 days. When these days were completed, the king prepared a 7-day feast for all the people present, from the greatest to the least, in the citadel of Susa. This feast was in the courtyard garden of the king's palace, where white and blue linen hangings were fastened with cords of white and purple linen to silver rings and columns of marble. The gold and silver plated couches were on a mosaic pavement of porphyry marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. They provided drinks in golden vessels, the vessels being diverse one from another, and royal wine in abundance, by the expense of the king. In accordance with the law, the drinking was not mandatory, because the king had directed all the stewards of his house to serve according to every man's pleasure. Additionally, Vashti, the queen, prepared a feast for the women in the royal house of King Xerxes. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Agatha, Zethar, and Carcas, the 7 eunuchs attending the needs of King how do you say his name? Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with a royal crown, to unveil her beauty to the people and the officials, for she was beautiful. But Queen Vashti refused to come to the king's command delivered by his eunuchs. Therefore the king grew very angry, and his wrath burned within him. Then the king spoke to the wise men who understood the times. In this way the king would speak before all who understood law and judgment. Those nearest him were Karshina, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Merez, Marcina, and Memucan. They were the 7 princes of Persia and Media, and the king's closest confidants, who met with the king and held the highest rank in the kingdom. According to law, what should be done about Queen Vashti, because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus? Ahasuerus, when it was delivered by the eunuchs.
And Memucan answered before the king and the princess, Queen Vashti has wronged not only the king, but also the princess and all the people who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For should this matter of the queen spread to all wives, then they would look with contempt on their husbands. When it is reported that King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she never came. This very day the noble ladies of Persia and Media, who heard of the queen's act, will say the same thing to all the king's princes. Then there will be more contempt and wrath. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree be sent by them, and let it be written in the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it may not be altered, that Vashti can never enter into the presence of King Ahasuerus, and that the king will give her royal position to another woman who is better than she. When the king's decree that he will make it is proclaimed throughout all his empire, for it is vast, and all the wives shall give honor to their husbands, both the prominent and lowly. The suggestion pleased the king and the princes. So the king did according to the word of Memucan. He sent letters to all the king's provinces in the script of every province and in the language of every people group, bearing the message in the language of his people, that each man should rule over his own house. Chapter 2. Esther becomes queen. After these things, as the rage of King Ahasuerus abated, he became mindful of Vashti, what she had done, and what was decreed against her. So the king's servants who attended him said, let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king. Let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, so that they may gather all the beautiful young virgins to be the citadel of Susa, to the harem under the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the harem, and let ointments and cosmetics be given to them. May the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the idea pleased the king, so he acted accordingly. Now in the citadel of Susa there was a certain Jew named Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Achish, a Benjamite. He had been taken away from Jerusalem among the exiles and carried into captivity along with the king Jeconiah of Judah by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. He was a guardian of Hadassah, that is Esther, who was his uncle's daughter, because she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely to look at and beautiful in form. When the father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. When the king's notice and his decree were heard, many young women were then gathered to the citadel of Susa and placed under the custody of Haggai. Esther was likewise brought into the king's house and placed under the custody of Haggai, who was in the charge of the harem. Because the young lady appeared pleasing to him and had gained favor in his sight, he quickly gave her the ointments and cosmetics, her allotted food, and 7 young chosen women from the king's palace. He also transferred her and her young woman to the best place of the harem. Esther had not disclosed her people or her lineage because Mordecai had charged her not to disclose it. Every day Mordecai walked around the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther fared and what might be done with her. The turn came for each young woman to go into King Ahasuerus after being 12 months under the regulations of the women, since this was a regular period of their beautifying, 6 months of oil of myrrh and 6 months with spices and ointment for women. When the young woman went into the king in this way, she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the harem to take to the king's palace. In the evening she went in, and in the morning she returned to the second harem in custody of Sheshgaz, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She did not go into the king again unless the king delighted in her and called her by name. When the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his own daughter, to go into the king, she asked for nothing except what the king's eunuch Haggai, who had charge of the women, advised. Now Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus at his royal house in the month of Tebeth, which is the 10th month, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than any other woman because she had gained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. The king held a great feast for all his officials and servants. It was a feast for Esther. He remitted his provinces from tax payments and gave gifts according to his royal generosity. Mordecai uncovers a plot. At the second gathering of the virgins, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not yet disclosed her lineage or her people, since Mordecai had so commanded her. Esther followed the command of Mordecai just as she had under his protection. During those days, when Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, 2 of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, who served as the keepers of the doors, became angry and sought to attack King Ahasuerus. But the matter became known to Mordecai, and he reported it to Queen Esther. And Esther reported it to the king in the name of Mordecai. When the matter was investigated and confirmed, both men were hanged on the gallows, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king.
And that is Esther, chapters 1 and 2.
Bye.
Bye.